Civil society organization Open Secrets and the Unpaid Benefits Campaign have applied to the High Court on an urgent basis to call for a transparent process in the selection of a new commissioner and deputy commissioner of the Financial Sector Conduct Authority. They've asked the court to interdict the shortlisting, interviewing and selection of candidates as directed by Minister of Finance Tito Mboweni to allow members of the public as well as the media to have full access to these processes. For more on this, I'm joined now by researcher at Open Secret, Michael Merchant. Michael, good evening and thank you very much for your time today. The Department of Finance, I think towards the end of September or so, announcing that they are appointing the commissioner as well as 4 deputy commissioners at the Financial Sector Conduct Authority, saying that process has now commenced. You're saying these are news that should not be celebrated.
Good evening, Thabo. Thank you for having me on the show. I think it must be celebrated that the appointments process is finally happening. And maybe just to remind the public that the appointments of a commissioner and the deputy commissioners to the Financial Sector Conduct Authority was actually announced and should have started in April 2018. So the process itself has been very delayed and it needs to happen. But we at Open Secrets have been writing to the minister about this issue for about 18 months, so about halfway through 2018 into 2019, to say that the appointments are so important to the public that the process must be opened up. And really the requests are quite simple. What we're asking for is that the shortlisting and interview process be opened up to the public and to the media to allow us to scrutinize the candidates, to see the questions that they're asked and how they answer. To build public trust in that process. It's a fairly standard democratic principle that has been applied to lots of important appointment processes, such as the Director of Public Prosecutions. And so we've been trying to get the ministers to engage on this, and the ministry has never responded to the letters. So when they announced that they were restarting the process, we wrote again, and we were left really with no option but to approach the court at the end of the day.
Are you satisfied with the process of filling the vacancies for the shortlisting panel?
Yes, so there's no problem from that perspective from our side. And we don't come to this from a premise that there's necessarily something untoward happening with that shortlisting panel. However, what we would say is that we've seen in the past with the precursor to the Financial Sector Conduct Authority, the Financial Services Board, regulators, that when appointment processes occur behind closed doors and between people with vested interests, the public interest can often be excluded. And the regulator is going to play such an important part in protecting citizens from the avarice of financial sector actors that it plays such an essential public role, which is why it needs to be open to that public scrutiny.
Talk to us about the role of this regulator. I mean, this is the same regulator that flagged a couple of transactions to would-be potential state capturers, so to speak, which are coming out of the Zondo Commission, is it not? Absolutely, and the FSCA is dealing with a range of important cases, not least of which are some of the cases related to fraud and corruption at Steinhoff, including allegations of insider trading. But we must remember as well that the FSCA plays a very specific role in South Africa's financial makeup. And so it was decided in 2018 that it would be established very clearly as what they call a market conduct regulator. And that is to ensure that all financial sector corporations treat their customers fairly and equitably. And I think we know in South Africa just how important that is. Our co-applicants in the matter, the Unpaid Benefits Campaign, are working specifically with pension fund members who have been excluded from accessing benefits, really due to poor conduct by pension fund administrators, for example. And the FSCA has such an important part to play in that world by ensuring that banks and insurance companies and pension fund administrators treat South Africans fairly, that they explain their products, carefully, and that they treat those customers fairly when they have those products. Yeah. And I think that is such a vital role. So the minister then believes he is following Regulation 9, subsection 1 to the T here, because in a statement it says the Minister of Finance has appointed the replacement members nominated by the 2 institutions for shortlisting panel and reappointed all other previous members, and hence establishing the shortlisting panel, and they must now
go ahead and do what they are appointed to do.
Yeah, and we do not disagree with that. As I said at the beginning, we definitely welcome the fact that the minister has put together the shortlisting panel. One of the things we were concerned about up front has been the delay in making these appointments, and leaving the FSCA without those key positions, such as a commissioner, really leaves it slightly rudderless. And I think that has been a problem. And that's why we've been very clear in our application that really we don't seek to hold up the process or to ask the Minister or Treasury to embark on a different kind of process. We're simply asking them to open it up to the media and to the public so that we can scrutinize the process, and particularly that we can scrutinize the candidates. Yeah. Because it's only really through access to that process that we can make kind of informed input to the process and hold the appointment makers and the appointees accountable for what they say and what they do.
And you're saying the minister for 18 months has just not responded to that request at all. Is it because the minister does not want this open, transparent process, or the minister has something that he wants to hide in as far as his appointments are concerned?
Well, Thabo, this is the thing that we find really disturbing about the process, and we're just not sure why we haven't received a response. So just to be clear with the public, the Minister and Treasury have never responded to us even to dispute the nature of the process or to say or to explain to us directly how they foresee the process going. The office has, over a period of 18 months, consistently acknowledged receipts of the letters, but never once responded. And so from our position, we are left with the lingering questions of why this lack of willingness to engage. It's quite a fundamental expectation of our public officials that they're responsive. And we felt that we've gone out of our way to invite an engagement about how we can open the process up. Yeah. And we do find it disturbing. I can't tell you exactly what the motivations for the minister are, but as he's seeking to rebuild trust in the South African economy and financial sector, you would think that he'd be willing to open up a process like this, to make it open and transparent from the get-go in his broader attempts to rebuild trust both domestically and in terms of foreign trust in the South African economy.
So what have you asked the courts as far as the remedy to the situation is concerned?
So we've asked the courts to halt the process simply until the minister commits to open up that process. So what we've asked the court to interdict any shortlisting and any recommendations until such time that provisions have been made to open up the court to the media and to the public with COVID-19 regulations in mind. And what we've asked them as well is that if any shortlisting appointments or recommendations have already been made, that those would be set aside on the basis that the process so far has not met the constitutional requirements of openness and transparency, and to direct the minister to make provisions for that openness.
Now, the panel held its first meeting on the 16th of September 2020 and noted the long list of candidates who applied for the commissioner position from the second advert that closed on the 16th of March. But because of the passage of time, the closing date of the advert, then the panel resolved that the position should be re-advertised again for 2 weeks, given the delays of COVID-19. Do you agree with that process?
I think that's probably quite a good idea on the part of the ministry. Given the extensive time between the different application processes, it's quite difficult to know how applicants would be in the process now, whether any would have fallen away. And so I think opening it up like that for a limited period of time was absolutely fine. And I'd also add that because they have opened up the process again, we have felt that we wouldn't be holding up the process by making this application, because they would have been receiving applicants up until very recently. And so that's why we also decided that given the extension of that time period, that this intervention wouldn't unnecessarily delay their processes.
Yeah. Michael, the other thing that has happened is this panel and these appointments and this process commencing happens just after the minister has gazetted new regulations which he says create for greater flexibility. What is the view of Open Secrets to that?
So I think that the greater flexibility that allows for the making of the appointment process is absolutely fine, and that the first regulations, for whatever reason, also for political reasons and a lot of changes in the ministry, that might explain why that process was out of time. And so I don't think that there's necessarily a problem there. But I think Treasury and the minister's notion that kind of a report back at the end is adequately transparent is really problematic, because what they've said is that, well, because the shortlisting panel will commit to releasing some of its deliberations and recommendations after the fact, that's sufficient. And what our central argument is in that regard, that regardless of how you tweak the process to better enable you to make a decision, it doesn't change the fact that you need to open up the actual interview processes where the candidates really are put under the pump to answer difficult questions about how they would treat this position, that it's that process that really has to be made open.
Now, this is an application on an urgent basis. When do you expect to hear this matter? Has the court come back to you?
Yes, so the ministry and the chairperson of the panel have indicated that they are opposing the application. And so they are filing their affidavits on Thursday. And given the short time frames, we would then be required to respond by the following Tuesday, after which the matter would be set down fairly soon thereafter. So we would hope for some kind of resolution on this matter within the next 2 weeks.